Into the ninth commandment, which Jackie read, which was so long. No, it's a very short one. She's probably very thankful that it was short. You might notice on the screen, this is not exactly what that commandment says. So the title of the sermon, Protect Each Other's Characters, is basically, we're giving away the punchline. This is what we got out of it, our study that we did on this. And a reminder, we did this study probably now almost 2 years ago, and we went through Deuteronomy and Exodus. And we shared with you guys at one point all of the 10 Commandments, and now we're going back and we're breaking them down. So Jackie just read this, Exodus 20:16, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbors. The actual, I believe this is NIV, this is what it actually says. And so we want to talk about what does that mean? How do we apply these things to our lives? Because if we just say, okay, just go and do that, some of us would be like, I don't even really know what that means. So my job today with you to start us off is to talk about what exactly does that mean and how do you even follow that. So here's a brief summary of when we shared all the 10 Commandments with you, and here were some of the things that we had shared originally. One of the thoughts I had during this was when you think of false testimony is basically lying. Saying something that's untrue about somebody else. It's lying. And so, as I was reading along, I came across this idea, and I'm not going to claim it's entirely original to me, but I put it in words that I can understand, and I put it this way. So lying shows a greater concern for how others will view us than what God thinks of us. Right? So if we're not being truthful, there's usually some reason why we don't want to be truthful with somebody. There's a variety of reasons why that happens, and I'm going to assume that everybody in here has lied at one point in their life. Don't raise your hands. I'm pretty sure you have. I'll raise my hand. I know it's happened to me. It's hard to believe, but it has. We've all done it, right? And for various reasons. The times that I can think of doing that, I can think of a couple different reasons for, wanting to lie. Sometimes it was, ooh, this person's going to be really mad if I tell them the truth, so I'm going to just tell them something totally different. Does not make it a good option, but it is a reason why somebody
For
might lie.
example,
Okay.
the wife asks the husband, how do I look in this dress? Do I look fat? He's on dangerous turf if he said, it doesn't look good and yes, you do look fat. That is lying.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to whitewash lying.
Yeah.
But
There are ways to kind of cope to answer that a little better than having to give I'm going to say an outright lie. But that's a good point.
maybe we need to learn how to be, I don't want to say a little devious.
Tactful?
Tactful is a nice word. That's good for devious or fibbing.
Yeah. Tactful, meaning answering it in a little different way. What are some other reasons, since Rosemary jumped in, what are some other reasons you can think of? You don't have to think of what time that you lied, but what are other reasons why people might lie? Anybody? And Stephanie, you can jump in if you can think of some too. So I already gave one away. Maybe you're afraid of the other person's going to get mad. What else?
You don't want to hurt somebody's feelings.
You don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Maybe there's an actual safety concern, right? If I say something, like my literal safety might be in trouble. So there's a variety of reasons why we might. But this talk here, I want us to just kind of think further about this idea. Okay, so false witnessing, lying, this summary that we gave about, it shows a greater concern for how we view others, right? All the reasons we just gave are mostly something about either how somebody else is going to look at us. That's another thing we didn't add in there. Maybe I'll look bad, right? How'd that happen? Pride, yeah. Question is that more important than what God actually thinks? So let's look at James 3:5. It says, likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boast. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark.
So true.
Right? How many of us, again, don't raise your hand, but I will, have said something and later you go, ooh, I should have not said that, and it just goes like haywire everywhere. Stephanie and I were talking about this the other night when we were getting this set up, and I was talking about, the funniest times when it comes to something like this is when I've been in situations where something happened, anything had happened, and go to bed, doesn't really matter, and I hear the story of whatever happened from somebody else who doesn't know that I was there. And I hear, you all know the game of telephone, and I hear it sometimes, and sometimes I'll hear a version of it, and I'm like, whoa, that wasn't even close to what happened. Now, sometimes there is variations for, you know, if we all saw an accident and we were standing on different sides of the road, you see a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, literally, I will get back a story from somebody, and they will say, well, so-and-so said, yada, yada, and I'm like, that wasn't even said. So how tangled things can get, and then those stories get going around, and we live in a small town, so we know especially how this happens,
yes.
where something
Yeah.
gets out and it goes, and
It gets out before it even happens.
yes, and somehow people know something ahead of you. Sometimes you're even, like I said, I've been involved in it, and I'm like, how do you even know that before I know that, or how did that get back out before I even said anything? And sometimes it's just craziness. And this is exactly why the Bible compares it to a fire. Because those of you who have been around fires, you know when you light fires, when you do well. Sometimes it's hard around here. When you do well, though, the little spark, depending upon what you're fueling that thing with, can very quickly go big flame, right? And so that's what this is talking about. It's not, oh, just a little flame or just kind of, like this is just going crazy. And can set, as it said, a full forest on fire. So here is another one for us to consider. Ephesians 4:25. Okay, so we just kind of talked a little bit about the problem. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. And I feel like this all just keeps showing up everywhere, Rosemary. All came in here again, for we are all members of one body. This is pretty plain. It says, put off your lying, put off your falsehood, speak truthfully to your neighbor.
When I was a kid growing up, I was a pretty big kid. I was out of school by then. I came back from Europe and I was living in my parents' house. And I just tried to be, I don't want to say a little devious, or I didn't want Mom to know. I came in kind of late.
Mm-hmm.
And all I know that in dealing with my mother, just tell the truth, whatever it is. It was good for me because I never tried to lie.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to always tell the truth. These are lessons you have to learn in your youth. Maybe all of you, maybe you were better. Maybe you didn't have this problem. But I wasn't a liar, but I was coming in late and I just didn't want her to know, and I was kind of trying to get to my bedroom. And no creaking floors, you know that thing?
Yeah.
But don't lie because it comes around and bites you.
Yes,
And
does.
there's so many stories that you got to cover up on. How do you untwist them and say it fast enough so that the other person won't suspect it?
True, and as I heard somebody say, you know, like you said, we get in this tangled web, and it's much harder to keep track of what you lied about than it is just to tell the truth. You don't have to think, what story did I tell, where,
Because you
how.
know what it is. Yeah.
Because you know what it is. So I want to dig in a little bit further into this word, going into a little bit of Hebrew word study. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it, but it is
Chicken.
the word for false witness. Okay, and so this, when I looked this up, and I'm actually going to pull open my notes on this. This was a very interesting study because it went beyond just what I was thinking of. So right here it says it's not just on the surface dealing with civil and legal matters. Okay, so what we sometimes think of when we just think false witness, we think of like going to court.
A court scene.
A court
Judges,
scene, you know, and you have witnessed the accident or whatever, and then they're, okay, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, blah, blah, blah. And we think, okay, yeah. And if you don't tell the truth, you're a false witness, okay? So yes, that does apply, that is true. And if it was just that situation, some of us would never have to worry about that, because some of us have never had to go to court. Some of us have had to go to court for various things, but it's not just that situation, because it also says civil matters. But it says, but deeper dealing truthfully in all aspects with our neighbor, which I love this point because it took it beyond just being out and about and being in the legal system and just, okay, we're dealing in business transactions, be honest, those are all good things, but it took it to say, in all that you're doing, are you being honest, are you being truthful, not only in your words, but in your actions? And I thought, wow, this is really powerful stuff. I mean, each time we've studied these 10 Commandments, I've always run across something where it just challenged me to think a little bit further. Because again, it's kind of easy to go, yeah, I've never done that one, I've never been to court and lied to the judge. This is not just about going to court, it also is, how do you deal with the people around you?
Can you give us an example?
Give us an example of,
What was just said?
we are coming into that. We are.
Okay.
And actually, some of this is going to come right here. So there's a couple different things going back into the Bible, which is going to give us some examples of what you're asking for, and it's right here. So it's a very serious matter. There are multiple texts. I mean, I have a handful of them written down. You probably can't see it from here. This is 2 pages worth of study notes, and I have one other page that has several texts on what exactly we were just talking about. What's a false witness? How does that look? What is it that we're supposed to be doing, right? And so here's just a couple of them. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to give you the summary of them. So Leviticus, a lot of them are found in Leviticus. A lot of them are found in the Old Testament, which shouldn't be a surprise. For those of us who've been Friday night Bible study, Deuteronomy has some things on this too. This idea of a false witness comes up over and over again with the law. But Leviticus 19:13, the gist of that one is don't defraud. So there's one example. So when we think of defrauding somebody, what exactly does that? Hey, Zacchaeus, come out of this tree. What does Zacchaeus say he's going to do? He says, I'm going to give back 4 times as much. Restitution. And so that's one way. So one example for you is, in areas where maybe you have, in some ways, cheated somebody out of stuff. Again, maybe not even just by words, but by actions. Leviticus 19:16-17 also says, don't endanger, speak truthfully. And I'm actually going to go to this one so you can understand that one a little better, because you might say, what do you mean don't endanger? Don't endanger what? So Leviticus 19:16-17 says, don't go about spreading slander among your people. Do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. I am the Lord. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in his guilt. And I thought this was interesting because this has a couple different things in it. And one of them, of course, was don't slander, but right behind this is don't endanger your neighbor's life. So could you imagine a scenario where, and I'm pretty sure that this happens all the time, all over the place, where somebody says something and it maybe has a little bit of truth to it, but it's a little bit twisted, or oh, I heard that so-and-so, or they're making a guess of, I wonder why they did that, that could not only put somebody in a bad light, but could endanger somebody's life. I mean, think about places where, what if you started some kind of rumor about some kind of crime that somebody committed, right? And I know that the judges should be able to ferret that out, etc. But think about all the time and money and cost that would be if that got back to the wrong person, there wasn't truth to it, and now everybody thinks that so-and-so did something that they didn't do. And now, if you will, they may literally endanger for a life, depending upon what it is, or maybe they're in danger of now they're going to have to do some jail time. I mean, hopefully, in theory, your judicial system will be able to ferret that out. But you could easily see how a scenario could put somebody in jeopardy in a variety of ways. Maybe you jeopardize somebody's job. Again, in a small town, if somebody doesn't have a good reputation, people that are hiring, they're going to know them. They're going to be sort of considering some of that when they're going into that. And so it's really important that we consider speaking truthfully. And that's why 17 says, don't hate your brother in your heart. And it actually says, rebuke your neighbor frankly. So it actually says, hey, if there's something that's happening, that's going down that isn't good, you need to speak truth to them. Has anybody ever heard the phrase, like, speak truth in love? Sometimes I'll hear people say that, right? Like, sometimes...
Softly, gently.
Yeah. Sometimes we do need to have those hard conversations with people, like, hey, that's not so cool, that's not so great. Because if you keep silent, it's almost as if you're just going along. We were talking about this last night, you're just going along with them, you agree with them. So this is another example too. Proverbs 3:28 to 29 says, don't hold back good from your neighbor. So here's just another thought here. So, in other words, you could do something good, right? If by speaking truthfully, if by speaking up, if by doing the right thing, you can help your neighbor, then do so. Don't withhold good from people, right? We have a tendency to think of things in terms of actions, right? I did this, I'm going to use some labeling. I did this bad thing, there's this consequence. I did this good thing, something happened. We tend to kind of forget by withholding one direction or the other, well, I didn't do this or I didn't do that. It's just as, in quotes, as bad, right? So if I wasn't involved in that, whatever bad thing that happened, but by me not helping out, by me not saying something ahead of time, maybe I knew something was going to happen, or maybe I was worried about somebody, I'm just as guilty. And so this is just saying, hey, speak up, but also, if you can do something good, if you can intervene, go ahead and do it.
Brooke,
yeah.
The lying thing is a little bit like murder. Because, and I put gossip in this category, because it's real easy to twist something, talk about somebody, but like you were saying, it has really serious consequences down the road. So a lot of people think, well, there's, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, we won't lie. But there's also, I think it's number 6, not to kill, not to murder. But when you gossip, it is a form of murder, because their reputation is at stake.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can blow up.
Yes.
And like you were talking, that there's danger perhaps of a person's life.
So thank you for that. So I'm going to add Proverbs 25:8-9, which talks about what we were just talking about. It does also say the meaning we tend to think of, deal fairly in legal matters. I'm going to leave it at that because I think that's the one we normally think of. And then Proverbs 25:18 says, a false witness is harmful, and it's harmful for all the different reasons that we just said. So one more thing for us to consider before Stephanie talks further about how do we apply this to our lives. And it is this story, we all know it, but the question would come back to, okay, so now we know we're not supposed to lie, we're not supposed to lie to our neighbor, we're supposed to speak truth. Who is my neighbor? Can I just be like, I just get to speak truth to the guy or gal that lives next door, that's it, and I can lie to everybody else? Well, no. Okay, is it just, just the people that I go to church with, I should speak honestly to them, but don't worry about anybody else? No. And in case you weren't sure, you can go to the story in Luke 10:25-37, and I'm going to give you a summary of it because y'all know this story, I'm sure. And it's the story of the Good Samaritan, right? And that story starts off with this guy coming to Jesus and basically asking him the who's my neighbor kind of question. And so Jesus tells the story, and he's going through and he says, okay, there's this guy that gets beaten up, he's a Jew, and he's left on the side of the road for dead. And all these other people come by, priests, etc., and they all don't help him. Levite, thank you, coming through, and they, for various reasons, don't want to help him. And then the Samaritan comes by, and in the story's punchline, Samaritan and Jews don't get along. So the story is a really radical, whoa, wow. He comes along, he's like, I'm going to help this guy. So he helps him out. And so at the end of that, Jesus asks, and that's a very brief summary. Again, you can look it up yourself, Luke 10:25-37. At the end of that, Jesus basically throws a question back to him, so who's the one that is the guy's neighbor?
Samaritan.
And the answer to that, of course, is the Samaritan, which is mind-blowing to people at that time. It's that guy's my neighbor? That guy counts? That person that I don't like very well, they look different, they talk funny, they whatever. And the answer to that is yes. All of those people, to use our word, everybody's your neighbor. So something for us to consider. And then Matthew 22:35, when we see the summary of the law, the second part of it after love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, mind, etc., love your neighbor as yourself. And again, it's not just the gal or guy next door, it's everybody around you. Stephanie, take it away.
Okay. So, how Brooke was talking is how you can, what it is, but I want to talk about how we can avoid it too. In Exodus 23:7, it says not only to don't be involved in it, but if we can help it, to keep away from it. Because even just being around it can affect how we think of somebody else. And so in this, it's saying that how God He won't judge the guilty, He won't judge the innocent. And so we can't judge either. This is also on judging somebody. And so I had a incident this last week. And so how God wants us to look at it is not how Satan wants us to look at it. Satan will keep throwing these temptations, if you want to call it, of putting lies on somebody else, blaming somebody else. And so this last couple weeks ago now, I had an incident at work had my whole workplace in uproar, and just how everyone wanted to take sides and how they wanted it to go their way, and kept coming to me and asking me how I thought it should be and who did I think it should be and all of this. And so it was like, it struck me because Brooke and I were studying this, reviewing this, I guess would be a better word, for today, and how here's a bigger thing, I guess you could say, not a small little detail, but Satan's like, here, this is what you're talking about. Are you going to follow through and not take sides or be a false witness? Because at the time we don't know, like, what side. Or are you going to take sides and point your finger? Like Rosemary always says, if you point your finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back. And so we gotta know how God looks at it and how He wants us to look at it. How does this happen nowadays? Well, that's one example, but there's so many others. It could be just siblings and how we get along. She did it. She broke the toy. But it could be us who broke it on accident, but we don't want to take the blame.
Would something help in a situation like this is if we held our tongue until we got all the facts together.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And when we had all the facts, our favorite word,
Yes.
all,
Mm-hmm.
we could be a little like, maybe like God. And, well, He already knows everything, so maybe that wasn't a good example. But getting all the facts together, not being ready to condemn somebody right off the bat,
Mm-hmm.
not, putting your dukes up like you're going to fight, just not making our minds up too quickly.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
I just want to jump in here. You made me think of something, Rosemary. The idea of making assumptions. You were saying jumping to conclusions. And I've had that on my brain for a couple of different reasons. But I was thinking, oh, I don't want to work with so-and-so or whatever, kind of in my head, maybe not out loud. And I really had to pray, God, help me to see this person how you see them. Help me not to just jump to conclusions with what I've heard about them or what I think I know or whatever. And both times, big times where I had done that, God really came through and showed me, like, yeah, you're jumping ahead here. This person is a person that needs your time and your attention, etc. And to me, how this relates to that is was falling for what Stephanie was saying. I heard things, I assumed things, etc., and had in some ways believed some of these things. But I was able to, with God's help, put those things aside, as you just said, till I could get the facts. And then many times, we're talking about how should you handle it. When you hear something about somebody, really the best way, and then jump ahead on Stephanie, go to the person and ask them themselves. If you want to know, check it with the source.
You know, we're getting a little bit into the idea of judgment, not to judge others. And I think the key thing to remember there is that God can see the heart. You know, he knows everything. Nothing's hidden from him. But God looks at a man, he looks at that person's heart. Whereas we, mere mortals, what do we see of that person? We see deeds. God sees the heart, so he sees the whole. We only see a smidgen of it, just the deeds, the actions.
And how can we handle it? Like you guys were saying, that we go to that person, or we go to God, or go to the Lord, and just get a better understanding of the situation. Would be probably. And God is truth. He has always been and always will be. And sometimes we will group people up, if you want to say. Like, oh, they hang out with that person, they are going to act like them, or go down that wrong path. But we don't know where they are at, so we can't judge them. God knows where they are. So there is power in the truth and knowing the truth. And so, in closing here, I just want to say that if we don't know, then why are we assuming and judging? If we can, even if we do know the truth, doesn't mean it's our place to judge.
Or to repeat what we've heard.
Also
Very
true.
true.
So just a reminder as we continue on, we have just finished number 9, and the idea of bringing this to protect each other's character. That's what we've been talking about. Speaking truthfully, not buying into when people bring information to us. All of those things actually have to do with being concerned about how somebody else is perceived. We were talking about that. Reputation is a good word too, right? And so all those things relate to our caring about how other people are perceived as well, which is important. And as Stephanie pointed out at the end, God is truth. God is love, but God is also true. And so those are really a core essence of who God is. So next time, which will be next month sometime, we will finish up the series with number 10. But until then, let's have a word of prayer.